Deep in the heart of Texas lies one of the most dangerous natural wonders known to man, Jacob's Well, a crystal-clear spring luring adventurers with promises of beauty, but hiding a dark and deadly secret beneath its surface. In November 1983, two experienced divers set out to conquer the mysterious depths. What they didn't know was that this tranquil spring would soon become the scene of a tragic and fateful dive, one from which they would never resurface. This is the story of Richard Patton and Clark McConnell, two friends, two divers, and one deadly mistake that cost them everything. A former Navy diver who operated a local dive shop has decades of experience. To qualify him as an instructor, Don was aware of the risks associated with scuba diving and taught his students with a cautious sense of safety. One of his most important directives was to keep clear of Jacob's Well. It was only a 30-minute distance, and has somehow enticed numerous scuba divers to their deaths. It is a breathtaking recreational spot with crystal-clear waters that reveal a deep hole in an apparently shallow river. Many swimmers free-dive into the hole, attempting to touch the bottom at 25 feet deep, before rapidly returning to the surface. This blue hole appears to be relatively simple on the surface. However, that's not the case beneath. The bottom at 25 feet is misleading because the corners of the walls slip away on a gravel slope, leading to a completely new underwater chamber. Explorations began once cave divers figured this out, and 3 distinct chambers were discovered beneath the main well. The first 2 chambers were largely open columns of water. The third chamber had a tight squeeze within. Most people found it daunting, but once through the other side, a diver enters a nearly 10-foot tall space, with trapped air and a tight peak at the top. A little opening, not large enough to squeeze through, was seen near the floor at the far end of the third chamber. What lay beyond that hole was too alluring to ignore. Many divers attempted to squeeze through the hole by removing gravel and boulders to make it large enough to pass. Don was requested to help collect the bodies of 2 men from Jacob's Well, only 4 years prior in 1979. Kent Maupin and Mark Brashear entered the 4th chamber and did not make it out. There was a gravel cave-in. Divers had to squeeze their bodies through the narrow connecting tube, which was only 2 feet in diameter. After the soldiers had passed through the tunnel, a gravel avalanche filled the tight tube. They undoubtedly spent their final moments attempting to clear the rocks and gravel, but they eventually ran out of time. The body retrieval crew was unable to clear the gravel landslide that buried Kent and Mark's bodies. Mark's body was swept away by the current in 1981. Kent's body remained in the 4th chamber for another 20 years. Don was sick of more people trying to reach the mysterious 4th chamber. In January 1980, he removed cement and rebar to hide the minor hole. He stopped the passage but left the bars in the middle to allow the water to flow. It appears that this concludes the 4th chamber's story. However, this is not the case. Only months later, divers had removed the bars and cement, leaving a note on the plastic slate reading, "You can't keep us out. Don has done his utmost to save people from themselves. Now he was just trying to encourage divers to stay away entirely." Unfortunately, Don's warnings may have aroused interest in 2 of his present students, Richard and Clark. They had heard of Don's body recovery operations, as well as his near-death encounter in the 4th chamber. Don was attempting to enter the 4th chamber when a gravel slip trapped him in the 2-foot narrow crawl space. His arms were pinned, so he couldn't pull the safety line or knock on his tank to draw his teammates' attention. After a few minutes, he had almost given up hope of survival, knowing that he couldn't move and that his air supply would run out in another minute or 2. He describes an unsettling sensation of serenity after realizing that this was it. His tank was empty, and he had swallowed some water. It was at this point that he experienced a violent surge of survival instinct, flailing and kicking enough gravel to push backwards. He backed out of the tube and spotted his diving partner there. His regulator extended so Don could breathe. Don gasped in the air, swallowing part of what he inhaled. The overwhelming fear had turned into relief at simply being alive, but the relief was short-lived. As he began traveling back up through the chambers, the discomfort of the expanding air in his stomach became unbearable. His diving partner's air supply was nearly depleted, so they had to keep climbing upwards to find a way out of the water. At a depth of 100 feet, air is compressed at 58 psi, 4 atmospheres of pressure. As he ascended, the air in his body swelled 4 times its volume at the bottom. By the time Don reached the surface, he seemed to be 9 months pregnant. He screamed in agony as his gut ruptured. Don recounted this harrowing experience to warn students that even seasoned divers can be surprised by deadly conditions in underwater tunnels. Despite the caution, Richard and Clark saw exploring the Forbidden Cave as an exciting adventure. However, cave diving presents unique challenges and risks beyond regular diving, making their expertise less effective in this perilous situation. Richard and Clark entered Jacob's Well on the Wednesday night before Thanksgiving, passing through the main well in the first chamber without incident. However, as they approached the third chamber, danger loomed. The tight juncture ahead increased risks, making it clear that the fast ascent to safety was impossible. Unlike open water divers who can follow their bubbles to the surface, cave divers must navigate carefully to avoid disorientation. Nervous yet excited, they reached the small opening in the fourth chamber. Richard removed his tank and squeezed through the narrow tunnel first, while Clark waited to follow. Moments later, when Richard's face appeared, he looked desperate and distressed. Richard burst through the opening, gasping for air, and had no tank. Clark quickly realized and shared his own regulator, allowing Richard to breathe. They began buddy breathing, carefully passing the regulator back and forth as they navigated the tight cave passages. The tunnel between chambers 2 and 3 demanded precise coordination and patience. Each man took turns breathing, then held his breath while passing the regulator in the cramped, silt-filled space. Finally, they reached the first chamber, relieved but disoriented in the dark. As they cautiously climbed towards the exit, an eerie sound stopped them cold. Clark and Richard, trapped in a cave, realized their air tank was empty. Panic set in as they struggled to escape a false chimney. Clark, desperate, swam 75 feet to safety, gasping for air. Tragically, Richard never emerged. Clark, shaken, called for help. Rescue arrived too late. Thanks for joining us on this harrowing journey into the depths of Jacob's Well, where bravery and desperation intertwined in a race against time. Clark's fight for survival reminds us of the fragility of life and the importance of preparedness in the face of nature's mysteries. If you found this story compelling, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more gripping tales from the underwater world. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What would you do in a situation like this? Until next time, stay safe, explore wisely, and always respect the depths.